I'm very happy to have James Ragan here. And maybe just for those of you who don't know Vaclav Havel Library, while here for the first time, my name is Veronica. I work here as program coordinator, and I would like to say that we have English events at least once a month. So I will be happy to see you here more often. And also we have a small exhibition about Vaclav Havel behind, so after the event you can have a look there. So I give you the floor. Many thanks for coming.
Thank you. Oh, I will stand. That's okay. So thank you very much. First of all, it truly is an honor to be invited to the Vaclav Havel Library for anyone to be able to come here and speak and to read his audio poetry and talk a little bit about a relationship that I had with Vaclav Havel. And that's a photo, actually, it was taken of us together. And actually, there's a little bit of surprise, although Veronica knows about the surprise already. And some of you remember that when Vaclav Havel was the president, he came to Los Angeles. He came to Los Angeles to give a special speech at UCLA. He was given a big prize. And from 1966, I used to come here as a young man to my villages in Slovakia. I had Czech grandparents and Slovak parents, and so I was the true Czechoslovak. And so I would always come here. And during that whole period, up until even I was here during the invasion, up until 1989 when the Berlin Wall fell, Havel was made president of Czechoslovakia at the time. He was in Los Angeles. He asked for a meeting. My books had been banned. He spent 6 years in jail, as most of you know, in and out. I only spent a short time under house arrest, and yet he and the people that were with him asked to prepare a meeting between the two of us. And when we met, the first thing he did was put his hand out and say, "We are colleagues." I will never forget that in my life. In the documentary you'll see later, it's in there also. It's with that moment that everything changed for me, because then he said, "I'm asking all Czechoslovaks to come back to the country, to come back and donate something to the country, not money, something of you." So I said, "Well, you know me as a writer, but I'm also an educator." And that's what he did. He said, "You will come back and teach at our university." 22 years I teach at Charles University. I brought my students here tonight. And I'm donating. I've never gotten paid, although they do take care of my flights now and housing and things like that. But the idea was to do something for the country like so many have done. So many of you right here have done. It was an honor to come back and teach the Czech students at Charles University, and then later I began to bring my American students over as well. But during that period that I was here, he became then, he said to me, "I will never preside over a split country." He was against the split of Slovakia from the Czech Republic. He was very clear about that with me. And it did happen. And no one knows this, probably doesn't think about it, but on the Wednesday before the Slovak had delivered the papers of separation to the parliament, the Slovaks had delivered those papers, Havel resigned. So he really was never the president of the split country. And then I received a phone call from my university president. I was a director of this large writing program at USC, University of Southern California. He said to me, he said, "Did you give the president of the Czech Republic a USC t-shirt?" I said, "No." "Are you sure?" I said, "No." "Wow." "Wait a minute. I did. The day I met him, I did give it to him." He said, "Well, it's on the front page of the New York Times. It's on the front page of the Tokyo Times, London Times. And so today I am donating the sweatshirt to the library, to Veronica." And the reason that is significant, as you can see right here. This is the photo that was taken, and it was in every window across Prague. Oh my God! Veronica, you are really good. All right. In any case, what he did was he took off his coat and tie, I suppose, and put on the T-shirt to walk out of the castle, and then that was the photograph, his first picture as he walked out of the castle after resigning his presidency. And that made it through all the different publications as well as across the city. And everyone knew about this. Well, he went through 4 of those T-shirts. I kept giving them to him. After the wedding, I kept giving him another one. And then in I can't remember the exact year, but I do remember that the Museum of Tolerance in Los Angeles were having their anniversary, and they invited Vaclav Havel to be the recipient, but also to be the main speaker. It was during that period when he was ill. Most of you remember how ill he got. So he sent his wife, the First Lady, Dagmar Havlova. She came instead. And then the film industry decided to honor her. So women in film decided to have a special evening for her, and they asked, would I interview her? Would I do the interview? So I remember preparing to interview with Dagmar, with the First Lady, but I had 2 T-shirts, and I remember giving them to her, and she screamed. She actually was so excited that she had one now, and she kept saying, he always wears this. I said, I know, I'm giving him another one, because he needs to. So anyway, it's my honor to even be able to give that as one of the many. All I remember is that what a generous person he was to me every time we met. I mean, I remember taking my students up Neruda. We were going up Neruda Street, and on that one corner, you know, that little restaurant, pub, or bar is, he was sitting there with one of his people from the, from his office, having a drink with his guards, and he saw me coming with the whole class, and he went, you can imagine when I walk over with the whole class and I introduce and say, this is the President of the Czech Republic. Having a drink, inviting you over. They were thrilled. I mean, this is the kind of person he was. If we were at Karlovy Vary, no matter where we were, he was stopping me, asking me, are you getting any writing done? When will your plays be shown here? He was always concerned that I would get my plays done, that I would have my books published. My publisher's right there. Venice published my book into Czech from English. So these are the things that I just always owed him. Was a new identity. The fact that I could come back to what was my native country. You have to imagine, I did it was so nice yesterday, Veronica, that they invited me on Czech TV. David Borek was the anchor. He introduced me, and I was able to tell him how, when I was younger, I just remember this beautiful country in the middle of Central Europe, Czechoslovakia, and how proud I was of being a Czech and Slovak, and that all these books that were coming into our house were from this country. I was reading even Rilke, who was born here, and then I was reading, listening to music from Smetana, Dvorak, I was listening to, reading all the wonderful books that were coming, not just from Kafka, but up through Kundera, and also Klima, and Klima and I were published by the same publisher, Girl Atlantic. And I remember just as a young man, how steep it was, how steeply involved I was involved. It was that I was involved in this country and everything about it. So for 22 years I continued to come back. For 3 months I brought my family back since they were 2 years old. They've been all coming. But I can tell also the small moments that were so memorable to me. He had done he was presiding over the International Pen Congress. Most of you remember that, 1994. So he invited delegations, everyone from Marquez, all the greatest authors from across the world came here for the International Pen Congress. Arthur Miller, I was part of the delegation, Arthur Miller, Edward Albee, they all came. Even Pinter came from London. They all came to honor him. And so he included me. It's just how large he was. He included me, and I, of course, didn't feel part of that group. But the fact that he wanted me sitting there as a playwright and poet among them meant quite a bit to me. But I must tell you, this is really tales out of school. we were sitting at Rados, I think it was, Jazz, and he took them all there. And Arthur Miller was right next to him. I was next to Miller. And Miller turns to me. Remember how he smoked so much? How Vaclav smoked so much? He turns to me and says, "Could you tell the president that I must leave? I'm not feeling so well." Okay. So I get up and I tell President Havel, you know, Arthur Miller would like me to take him and get a cab because he wasn't feeling so well. We got outside. He says, "I'm not really sick, Jim." But he keeps blowing his cigarette smoke in the I was getting sick. I couldn't take it anymore. So he didn't want to offend the president. So he had me tell me he's going over. He's not feeling so well. And then there were just other moments. I do know that when the split occurred, and he was now then elected the president of the Czech Republic, I still remember how the country had a referendum. I think it was either a radio, somebody was doing it, trying to find the most important personages of Czechoslovakia, the most major names. And to no one's surprise, this is how much he was loved, to no one's surprise, Charles IV came in #1 in the international voting, came in #1. Tomáš Masaryk came in 2nd, and Václav Havel came in 3rd, among all the possibilities. And I remember having a reading that I was doing, and him showing up in the back room. He showed up in the back room to listen to the reading, and he went like that to me, like, "Don't announce him." I thought that was classy. So I didn't say a word. He stayed a little bit, he listened, and he left. I went, "Oh my God, that's beautiful." That one moment. Of course, I did another reading in Ivan Havel's apartment when Lauren Bacall, you know, the actress, walked in, and no one heard another poem I read. No one even heard me after that. They all watched her go to the back. She was somebody I knew, but he had that dignity about him. Don't say a word. So to be at this library celebrating him means a lot to me. And I'll probably talk a few more things as I read some poetry. I'd like to dedicate a few poetry, but I'd like to thank, for example, Veronica, first of all. Veronica for setting this up, all the emails, everything she was doing. To Marta, who runs this whole beautiful, if you got a chance to go upstairs, you must, to go up and see the real exhibition and the rest of the library. And I titled this "A View from the World," a view of the world from Václav Havel's balcony, because for those many, many years, I was given the privilege to stay at Vašinova na Breží in the very apartment that he ran the office, he ran the government from. I remember that for at least a year, and where he lived. I stayed there every summer, so my huge debt goes to Ivan Havel and Dasha. Ivan and Dasha Havel, who continually make sure that they have that apartment for me so that I can come here and write. I have produced 5 books from that balcony. I have done 2 plays at that balcony, and these plays have been produced in New York off-Broadway. They've been done in Moscow twice, in Beijing. I had to go there for a production, Paris, Athens. And then how many films? I mean, I had worked on several films that I had worked on here at this, one that just won major awards called Dom, the House. Another that I had worked on called The Border. And then Clown-Wise was just out that I had worked on. And now another one that I've been writing for the last couple of years, which will take place here in Prague. I love this film because I was given the latitude to use whatever location I wanted, and so I chose Prague. I said, this is where I want this film to be. And it originally started with George Clooney's company hiring me to write the screenplay. I didn't want to put that on camera as much as to say also that he's no longer involved, but it started that way. We had a big writer's strike, and the writer's strike lasted a long time. And by the time we were done, he had to move on. He had many, many other contracts. So he's really not involved now, but at least the impetus came from that. And the real impetus for me has come at that balcony. I sit out there every day. Do you know that I am the most photographed person in this city? Most photographed person. Every tour bus stops at the corner below. They all get out. They take pictures of the dancing building, and then you can hear them say, the team leader saying, "Oh, and that is where the President of the Czech Republic, Vaclav Havel, was born and grew up." All the cameras turn. I'm up there writing, so I do the Queen Elizabeth. I wave at them, and they all go home and say to their friends, "I think I saw one of the Havel family up there. Look, I got photos of them waving at me." So that balcony has meant the world to me. I watched the world over that beautiful river Vltava all the way up to the castle, and knew that he spent a life watching and looking at the same view, inspired by it, and then ended up the president of the country. And I also realized that all of the historical, all of the political, all of the period of the Russian invasion, the way I was put under house arrest on a train in a bathroom and kept there, and everything that people suffered during that time, that period, I was actually a witness to them, and then beyond. And just knowing in my own family what they had to endure during that period. And then suddenly with that wall coming down, and with what I called in this documentary you'll see later, Vaclav Havel as the center, a moral center for this country. That basically everything changed that quickly. I still remember the first theater festival he had on Spiletsky Island. Do you remember that? He invited all the best theaters from across the world to come and have stages set up, even for children's theater, and made sure that I was there giving introductions to the plays. It was just phenomenal to see the arts come back, to see the poet present. And he gave me several of his poems. I could tell you this too. They did a film here called Mission Impossible, Tom Cruise. And I remember Tom Cruise's sister calling me at my home, saying, and this gives credit to Cruise, I don't give him a lot of credit for a lot of other things, but in this case, I shouldn't say things like that. He's a wonderful actor, but he did a wonderful thing here. He couldn't find an English version of a Havel play, and he was meeting him in 2 days. And he was big enough not to want to meet the president without having read something of his. He wasn't the star, the president was. So his sister said, "It's come to our attention that you have poems that Vaclav Havel had given you." And I said, "I do. Could you fax those? That's wonderful. Can you fax them to him immediately?" I said, "I'd be happy to." So I did. I faxed about 5 poems, but I did something else. I faxed him an essay. It was the speech made by Havel in Germany when he received this huge prize. And I think it was titled, at the beginning was the word, I had the essay. I sent that too. I said, "Make sure you talk about this." Who calls me back but Tom Cruise personally? I want to thank you. As soon as I mentioned the essay, he told me who gave it to you. He knew immediately. And that's, again, those perimeter events I had, and then the run-ins we had, and even drinks that I was able to sit down and have with him. I wrote a poem that celebrated his passing, and then I also had sent it to Dagmar Havlova, and she sent me the most beautiful letter back for having written this poem when he had died. Actually, Vaclav had died the day before my birthday. You can correct me, it was December 18th, my birthday was the 19th. I think it was on the 18th or the day after, it was right at that time. I called Ivan Havel's brother to give my condolences, and he said what I knew. He said, "Well, James, you were with him last summer. We were surprised he could last until this period of December. I never thought, I didn't think he was very weak. He had made that film." But maybe I'll begin with that poem. It's a poem entitled "A Good Sky." It's titled A Good Sky, and I have since used it in other memorials, but originally I had written it in dedication to him. And it's just, there's always a good sky, very celebratory. I show you a good sky. It could hold a kite sipping in a breeze. It could, I'm going to begin that again. I'm getting a little sentimental here, I think. It could hold, I show you a good sky. It could hold a fleet of geese above a kite, sipping in a breeze, or foliate the wind with leaves of cherry wood and hedge. It will blanket your sleep with mirrors of stars and the soft undressing of night. It will love you solely through the Venus dawn, rubbing your eyes awake the moment before the sky's light hangs its stars. I show you a good sky. It will rain its reflection on your one troubled eye, the one that blinks each time a hawk rants by. I am no one's romantic. No, I am the sky's shadow wish, writing this only to breathe its light. I show you a falling sun, passing like a lover to be near you, allowing no star or bulb on a corner lamp to possess you as you are. Look, here I am, the sky. I am the sky's moon falling. It will shave a horizon out of peaks like none your memory has ever carved. I show you a good sky. Its broad blue ribbon will wrap its mind around your eye's imagination and tease you into smiles. Now, be patient. Let your breathing rest a while. I should also begin, as I do with all readings, but that one the Dagmar truly did like, especially the last lines. But I do begin all my readings with the fact that I'm one of 13 children. Some of you have heard this beginning. I always like to do this, to remind everyone that I'm one of 13 children, and it reminds me of and Slovak is my first language, but it reminds me of the young couple who has 5 children, all of whom have brown hair and brown eyes, but the 6th child has blonde hair and blue eyes, and the husband asks, "Is this truly my child?" And she says, "Of course it is." And 20 years go by. "Tell me the truth, is this 6th child really mine?" "Yes, it is, darling." 50 years goes by. We're celebrating our 50th wedding anniversary. "Tell me the truth, is the 6th child truly mine?" "Yes, it is, trust me." She's now on her deathbed. It comes one last time. "You're about to meet your maker. Tell me the truth, is the 6th child really mine?" "Yes, of course it is. The other 5 are not." In my family, I was the only one who went into the arts. I was looked on as suspect, not really part of the family. All of my brothers and sisters went into the empirical sciences. They became engineers, architects, and everything. And then you'll hear me, actually, there's another anecdote I love to give, and I'll say it here because it's going to be in the documentary. And it has to do with my father loved this. He liked to tell this joke all the time on ourselves. He would always say things like, we are children of consonants and misplaced vowels. That basically Slovaks, Czechs, Hungarians, Russians, Polish, they have many consonants in their names. So he said the joke was about the Czech immigrant who comes to America and he goes to an optometrist. And the optometrist pulls out the chart and says, "Can you read the third line on the chart?" He says, "Read it, I know him." One of the poems that I take a lot of pride in, and Miroslav Holub was a very good friend, a great, wonderful poet. He translated this into Czech, and when Miroslav Venice published this in the book Hladovezed, The Hunger Wall, it's the opening poem and the title poem. And it has quite to do with the fact that when I first came here, I had just witnessed riots in Los Angeles and saw the divide between the rich and the poor, the widening abyss between the rich and the poor, and then came here and saw just 6 months later the country splitting, what I felt was the poorer Slovakia from the richer Czech Republic. And so I was at the Lavka, and I saw the wall coming down to the river, and I asked the waitress, "What is that?" Because it looked like a fortress wall, and she said, "That's called Hladovezed." She said, "You can call it the hunger wall." And I wrote this poem based on that. That sometimes, especially in America, we're too much at ease with, we watch hunger very well. And so you'll hear that image of whale coming up throughout the poem. After walking to the bridge at Karlova, we found the river where at dusk the swans dipped their beaks into the falls for sanctuary. The trees closed in for shade. We gazed through willows to the opposite hill, a single light from a room growing thick with sadness. Solemn smoke now cooked the evening meal. We were just about to treat our hunger well when, out of sunlight undeclared, a shaded massive stone began to stretch its neck along the slope. It would scan the water for a quarter hour before the foliage rubbed its throat, some internal hunger now assuaged. For only moments, then again, the impulse thumbed like whalebone on a drum. The poplars began to rustle. A hawk, spiraling like an aspen deep in chatter, betrayed its nest to block the sun. The dam below rose up to boulder water, as if to show how easily wars are won. They feed the hunger wall, the waitress points the fingers in her skirt, rubbing coins. Her hands are shoring up to feed the past. "I don't want the poor to endure me," she said, King Charles said to those he paid, as he watched their faces building borders, hunger for a wall. As she watched the smoldering Voltava River, watching hunger well. What I should have mentioned too was that Charles IV had felt sorry for the poor, so he had them build this wall just so he could pay them. It was the first public works project in history, truly. My father used to love to take us around trains. We would come from Košice, we'd come from Humana to Košice, down to Bratislava, to Prague. I still remember those wonderful trips because he would always bring 2 bottles of wine. He didn't care what age we were. We were 6 and we were having a glass of wine. Even at our table at home, we drank wine very early. It's very European to do that. But he always had the apple with a knife that he would cut. And the bread, you know, he'd take the baguette out and he'd cut it in half and he'd put cucumbers, salami, tomatoes, all of it, and then he'd cut it 1, 2, 3, breakfast, lunch, dinner. When he passed away, I wrote the poem Breath, and it's celebratory also. Breath tugs the skin so hard in sleep, the limbs expand, as if we can sweep an arm out width and lengthwise of a whole forest and call it down into the small room of our own planet. In the high trees of imagination, in our free breath, we tease ourselves to crawl to the top of a pine, inhale an aspen, stoke it in the sun, its sweet aroma royally in the fragile air, and stepping down still in the dark of our own sleep's bed, we study the mind's way out. At night, in the wardroom practicing death, my father, with owed breath tucked in the bed of his lungs, learned the punctual notes of leaving, the dark that coal excels before the last grind of fire whittles it to space. A railroad man who toured the world room in a Pullman, he knew the blissful paths of the river for miles, and would, when night burned up, stow the moon's tall flame in ash. In memory, he owed the dark each splice of rusted rail and sagging boxcar. Breath, as in the sleep of legs, he saved for the mind's departure. This one also I had written. This one has been read for 5 to 6 presidents already. So 6 heads of state I've done in readings, and every reading, this is the poem they ask for because of one line in it. You'll hear the line. And ambassadors also. I had just come back from reading here in Prague. And I remember coming home and seeing my youngest son on the floor jumping knights over horses. The beautiful simplicity of his playing on the carpet. And I got down with him and just kept on playing and doing the castles and everything else that I could. And I remember how complicated my life had become in the sense of all the travels and everything I was doing. And people would say, would you do it all again? And I say, absolutely, I wouldn't change a thing, except I would pay attention to the simple things. So this is entitled, If for Each of Us. If for each of us a rope could swing us long and light across a widening trough of all that fails us in our lives, I would want to land upon the Isle of Echo, lush with repetition, green with being original in birth, and twice the twin a wave might dance along the scurry. I would want a canyon tall for hawks to carry long the deep tattoo of voices on the air. I would want an ear to hear what words to read again to memory, what verse to carol, thoughts to root. Before the sparrow's flight takes us down to truth. I would want to hear a vowel repeat in consonants for the alliteration's frothy throat. And should the landing fail its footing, I would want to know what inspiration in shorter flight one syllable might repeat, as in the swash the flat stone makes to skip across the light in water, or the voice the wind gives to birch and linden. I would want the distance to all understanding to narrow just enough to fail at failure. I would want to know the chances to learn to love again what first I dreamed, free as wonder, soft as touch, and of all things simple, to care again for them as much. You heard the line, I'm sure. All understanding to narrow just enough to fail at failure. Coming back from a reading we were doing in Moscow, I was telling the class about this before I came here. That's why I was a little delayed. We had been flying for 14 hours. We landed at LAX. I remember as we were waiting for our luggage, a book of poetry came down onto the conveyor belt. A lone book of poetry by Rilke, who was born here in Prague. Rilke's book of poetry came down. It must have escaped from someone's backpack. But you can watch all the people looking at their luggage, and then there was the book. And then back to the luggage, and there was the book. And it was round like this, and they kept looking to see the book. And then I realized, in writing this poem, that I love the fact that this was the first time for most of these people where they're actually forced to acknowledge literature. So this is entitled Rilke on the Conveyor Belt at LAX. A rick of pages, it falls hardly noticed into motion, and down the track unspined it cycles time between a rucksack and laundry. A book no thicker than a wallet or a comb, it is the unworthy carry-on, newly bought, colliding with a carpetbag or steamer on the unlikely navigation into being where it's not. Each passenger's watched it circle more than once, a bold intrusion into the archipelago of things familiar. There's no fixed point of concentration, no laughter, no elation when the eyes dissect the slow descent of baggage into orbit. As if in taking up an arm strap, each handler slews a body to the spars of his shoulder. Had Rilke himself fallen, unbound, lying in the United States, he would have passed unnoticed by the baggage check or porter who failed to think it odd or such a pity to tag him at the lost and found. How many miles had his words trespassed? How many cities alive, unread among so many ports of authority? A gold leaf of art, so grand in the pall of memory, it gives the mind encouragement to survive. Unless, unsung like a soldier's duffel duty bound, fear spreads its tarp along the spine of language. Creation can end this way, abrupt and final, like travel to the ends of the world with no intent or vision, but destination. Veronica, do you have any water that I can that would be good.
It's right there behind you.
It's right behind me. Thank you very much. That was quick again. He's good. I'm going to dedicate this to my students right now. You'll enjoy this because one of the things that I've told students is that Somerset Maugham once said, the mediocre artist is at his or her best. The mediocre artist is always at his or her best. They play it safe, so they're always at their best. But the pure artist, the true artist, is the one who takes risks, who fails and fails and fails. And when they hit, it's major. So rejection is a big part of this. There are many times when you'll be rejected. So I must read what I received, if I can find this quickly enough. This is dedicated to my students. When you hear this rejection I received, it'll make you feel better. I'll look this way. It's from Japan. It's a Japanese rejection letter. We have read your work with inexpressible pleasure. We swear on the sacred memory of our ancestors that we have never before encountered such a masterpiece. If we publish your admirable work, His Majesty the Emperor will undoubtedly insist on its being a model for all future writing, and will forbid our publishing any work inferior to yours. Since talents like yours emerge only once in every 1,000 years, this would put us out of business. And we must therefore refuse your divine work and deposit it at your feet, trembling at the thought of the severe judgment we shall receive from future generations for failing to include it in our pages, work of such sheer genius. You hope to get rejected like that. The letter was worth it all. I'm going to also do something that Vaclav Havel gave me an honor, a great honor. When it was the first, I guess it's October the anniversary, he sent one of the letters that he wrote to Olga from prison. And would I read it at the Czech and Slovak Institute in Los Angeles, a huge institute at the time. And I remember reading this on his behalf, and there wasn't a dry eye in the whole building. It was quite moving. And then he honored me again by, during the, I mentioned earlier, the anniversary of the Museum of Tolerance. He sent this poem for me to translate, which I then did. And Dagmar Havlova read it in Czech to this audience at the museum, and then I read it in English, the translation. So I will just read the English translation, but it was a prose poem, and it will sound more like a prose poem to you, so, but it was something he had written for the occasion. And it has a wonderful center to it. It was a brilliant September Sunday. It's called September Sunday. It was a brilliant September Sunday, and I and a friend found a man in the park lying on the ground, trembling between life and death. We took him to the nearest physician, a stern, gray individual. He treated the man for an hour, gave him numerous injections, food and drink, the last cup of coffee in the house. I and my friend were anxious as to how much he would charge for this treatment, and where would we find money to pay. When later he gave us his recommendation letter for the hospital, we found a 25-crown banknote in the envelope for a taxi. He mumbled and blushed. Half a year later, we read that this same physician was sentenced to death for high treason and subversive activity. Then I thought to myself, I vaguely understood what capital punishment was. And that is still at the museum. An eternal flame has it there, so that people can read it, and then the translation next to it in Czech and in let me see, I'll read maybe a couple more. And then those of you who would like to stay, I'll do a little Q&A, and then those who would like to stay, the screening will be on, about an hour screening. It's a film that Arena Films had asked me to do, not to do, but would I be the subject of it. They came to me. They did a film called Peacemakers with George Clooney and Nicole Kidman. I still remember when they came to me, we'd like to do a documentary on your life in the arts, and I remember saying, why? I can understand Beyonce, doing one on mine, and then they just went through a biography and said, well, you did this, you did that, and I agreed to it, so you'll see the results. It opened at the Bratislava International Film Festival. No one knew I was in the audience. I was never more frightened in my life. I hadn't seen it. I had no idea what they had done with me. And the audience response was so long and genuine, they made me go down on the stage with the director to take the applause. I was in tears. And you'll find also that when they came to my house to shoot, they shot me all over Europe, and then they came to Prague a lot here, and then to the villages. But my son was in my home, and they asked, would you play some piano? He was playing piano. Would you play some piano while your dad reads a poem? And he said, okay, and he did it, and they looked at it and they went, that was quite good. Will you do the score for the whole film? So my 18-year-old son actually did all the music. He got his own applause at this 1,000 people in this festival. They had a huge applause. So I'm proud of him, as you can see. Okay, so I think I should read a poem that I dedicated to Vaclav that's in the book. It's also in Adolazet. I'm sorry. I'll do that. May I have Adolazet? May I have the book back there? Someone could get the yellow book, the Hunger Wall. That's it. Thank you. Thank you. This is a poem that I had dedicated to him when he became the president. The only way, it's called Stone Steps to Tlačany for Vaclav Havel, and the only way to Tlačany is through Terezin, from what I did with this poem. That you must take all of the history of this country, from the Dice to Terezin and to the rest, to know how important this country is in the world and how important this particular president was. So I begin with three parts. One is the Charles Bridge, then St. Vitus, and then finally Terezin. As I waltzed the New World to Tlačany, Dvorak's New World Symphony, as I waltzed the New World to Tlačany, and did not feel in my feet the pull step of gravity, the low wall of wind denied me, and did not hear among the spuds of maple barks the asper tones of a flutist's long wind whistle, my eyes were drawn to eternity in an inch of cobblestone. And counting as if through each rasp of breath, I climbed the moat wall of Nepomuk to reach communion with the sky's beginning. I hurried through the strings of marionettes, to jump through stacks of easel paints the gypsy cleaned, and hurried past ensemble tombs of Saints Xavier and Marguerite. The skein of clothes, the fragile bag woman drowsing on Neruda Street, spread affectionately for little more than some sleep and little snores to do. At St. Vitus, at the crest, beyond the Titan's gate, where spires steep on the sky's slope formed their covenant with death, I bowed deeply to the knees of gods imagined, and by such mind-sent genuflection breathed the swill of parlor's breath up from the seven locks and down my throat. I worshipped dust in shoes I half-stepped to the jazz of grinder stones. At the crypt of Wenceslas, where the vaulting soars, I prayed to the rose mirror of all creation that faith in the planet's dream of life immortal began with wind in the spark of ochre. I adored all stones on earth, and as they fell from heaven. At Terezin, with my hair soot red as coals above my grandfather's bones, buried near the poems of Desnos, I hurried through the gate of death, up the gallows knoll, the executioner's chiseled wall, to see the Orge rivering out to wag the elves' long tail, and hurried through the tunneled mounds down again to hell, past the fire's windlash of oven grates, the holding cells, where brush wire and Jewish arms in tubs of creosol scrubbed all brains of the mind's eternal no. In their bones, the earth's push step, the Aryan angel denied, moved me to doubt in a changing world that all things, including stone, began from one single godly loss of breath. On the slab at Terezin, in the Lord's house, I climbed to bed, cold as heaven, and played dead. I would read more, but I think in the documentary there was a couple of times when I'm reading some of the poems I would have read, so you'll see that in there. But I'll be happy to take any questions now from anyone, students or old friends, many of them here, as though you hadn't heard any of this before.
I'm more upset that you called me old.
What's that? Any questions? I was going to talk quite a bit about just the period of even walking down Bartholomew Bartholomew Street, or most of you know what happened on Narodny when the students were jammed into the one area of the street and the police blocked them off and just beat them mercilessly. That was the last event where even the communists in the city had said, that's enough. That was the bending moment when Prague and the Czech Republic, Czechoslovakia had lost any faith in communism.
When was that? When did that event occur?
It was I think we watched the film. That would have been in '89, but I think it was in November 19th, something like that. It was '89. It was the same year the wall had fallen and already across to most of the countries like Poland and Hungary and then here. It was already changing. But it was a difficult period. I know in my own villages, we had to whisper. Communism is no good. Everybody whispered. And then when that happened, when the Russians invaded, nobody would hold it back. Everybody screamed it out. Jan Palach died at the top of the square, putting himself on fire. So many others, two others. Jan Zajíc, the second one, who no one remembers. They remember, but not as they do the first. I'd written a poem about that in the Hunger Wall. And then how everything changed with Havel sending that letter, and Charter 77 occurred. But to go through that period, I remember in my own villages how my cousin Peter, I used to love to get on the back of his motorcycle and go over the hills, and his mother said, you do not do anything with my son, Peter. And they disowned him because he was a card-carrying communist. He was getting able to ride buses out into Yugoslavia everywhere he wanted, and they disowned him as a family, and it was just like that family split up. People afraid. I remember how I got arrested. I won't even go into that. It's not worth it. Just so you know, I just remember a very important moment where someone had put my book on the library shelf in Humene, and the librarian called me to come in and wanted to know, what is your book doing here? Because it was banned. It was a book that I had written about Pollock, Alexander Dubček, about the invasion, many poems against the regime. And I said, I don't know, and I was being honest, I had no idea why it was there. I figured my cousin probably put it there. And she did something that just, I would never have believed. She took scissors out, cut out the poem for Pollock, cut out the poem for Dubček, the poem about the Russian invasion, threw them into the trash can, and then said, now it can remain. And I never saw censorship so graphic in my life as I did that.
Now, in that instance, do you believe that she was doing it to defend your book, or was she being complicit with the...
Complicit, without a doubt. Complicit. And through the whole thing, before she had done this, the way she was acting, she was a very attractive, beautiful young girl. And I couldn't imagine her being a communist. You know, looking at her like, why would you need to? And then when she did that, I went, oh my God, she believed this. And but that's how it was in many ways. Getting on a train and suddenly, when the Russians had invaded, suddenly making you, knowing that I was American, and they already, and then all the times I had to report to police stations, everywhere I went to, well, it's on the film, having to report. I mean, I remember in Slovenia, I had a Fulbright, and the American embassy said, would you take 10 Life magazines and 10 Time magazines and 10 Newsweek magazines in? I was going into Bratislava, into my villages. They built a soft bottom, a fake bottom to my suitcase, and put the 10 of each there. And so I had smuggled in magazines. I was never so frightened in my life. I'm thinking, what am I doing? But I did it. And that morning, I gave a reading in a fire in a basement with a candlelight for the other poets, and that's where I was going before going to my villages, and then delivered all these Time magazines and Newsweeks. And then later, my mother, after I told her I'd done this, she was just shaking her head. And then she said, I swear, she said, they are building 2 churches at night in the villages. That's when they would build them. The authorities, if you were caught, you'd be imprisoned, but the authorities would turn an eye. Knowing it was being built at night, could you take these clothes for the infant Jesus of Prague in for me? My mother had me smuggle clothes in, and since I knew how to do it now, I put them in a false bottom, and I took these clothes, the infant Jesus of Prague. You have the church right here, by the way, one of the patron saints, and I took these clothes, and to this day they are on the statues in each of these churches that got built. My mother was doing. Her work was in churches in Tokyo. Bishops used to come to her. She could have made clothes for the Queen of England. She was that good. And she made these beautiful clothes for all the churches, Beverly Hills. I remember Montreal, seeing one there. And this is what people, this is the lives they would take. This is what they would do to just keep some of their identity. Mark back there, he knows so much of what he had to go through during a very difficult period. So it's just it's a history that this country should be, this country should be proud of how they responded and how they've come out of it all. Some of the best and brightest, yes.
So you talk and write a lot about this period in Czech history and the resistance and the price that people paid.
Right.
But you also talk a little bit today, at least anyway, about a kind of a different system in the United States and a different kind of restriction dealing with, I think you talked about with economics, with rich and poor.
Right.
You talk about black and white a little bit. So can you talk about comparison?
Yeah, it's I'll do it by example. We went to in the weddings in our villages, the Romas were only allowed in someone's home if they were there to entertain. And what a valuable lesson I had learned. We were at this wedding, my own father's brother, their family, sitting at the table, and they had Peter was we would say gypsy in those days, but the Romas. And he had a deep cleft in his head from something. And my father was there. They were childhood playmates, apparently. And he looked, and he says, "Peter, is that you?" He was playing the whistler. He was playing the violin. He says, "Yes, John, it's me." He went, "Oh my God, come, sit." And the rest of the table, I was sitting there. They were going like that. You do not. They are there only until they could never sit at a table. My father got up. He was a good violinist. He got up, took the violin from Peter and made him sit at his table. I was never so proud of my life. That moment taught me so much. He didn't care what his family said. You're sitting down, and he played. So there was prejudice here on all levels. And then when you look back in America, the inability for our country, I wrote about it during the civil rights years and a lot of other periods where we were going through fires in the cities, a lot of marches, everything was going on. So when I came there, not when I came there, but my brothers and sisters were born here, they came. And as a child, I remember the prejudice I suffered because of my language. Because all they heard was this foreign tongue. I was always speaking Slovak, and so I was always in these fights. I don't know why. I was always in a fight, someone wanting to fight with me. I was like every other child. I wanted to be loved. And then you had to learn to defend yourself. So I had a very good sense of what it was like to have that kind of prejudice. And I remember as I learned English to speak more and more, I saw communication as a matter of survival. Language. I began to love language. I noticed the fights were less and less. And I could win battles with words rather than with fists. And that's what I've been doing ever since. So yeah, my family suffered in many ways the prejudices that many do now. But over here, that existed on many levels as well. But the Czechs and Slovaks all had a rough time when they first arrived. My father went early, and they all had a rough time. Same principles. Trying to overcome all the prejudices that were set up against them. But I don't know, that just answers a part of the question. But yeah, I began to write a lot about that with my own understanding. Veronica, you'll tell me when we should. Okay. All right, I'm waiting for you to just do that. So, and she just did. Okay, so we will stop. Thank you so much for coming tonight. And I hope you'll stay for this, to watch as much as you can, because I'm still shocked by it all that they wanted to do this.